Well, first of all, it's absolutely an honor. I feel very privileged to have been invited to be the keynote today, especially when looking at all the excellent contributions of other speakers that I have really enjoyed over the past few days. I was really impressed by the high level of embedding and internationalization at home in the curriculum, but also, for instance, Miriam Haug's contribution about a critical look at virtual exchange, which I think is a very important issue as well in our way of conceptualizing intercultural competence. I met Anthony indeed when he was delivering a keynote at BUAS Breda, and his presentation, I really took photos of nearly all the slides and talked to my dean and colleagues about it. Like, yes, we should really shout out more about what we are doing. And yeah, I hope to be able to contribute a little bit today with the way we try to make impact. I'd like to give a short disclaimer. I'm not a native speaker of English, so I might be looking for words or use the wrong words or wrong expressions sometimes. I hope you can forgive me. Show us your impact. That is exactly what a former dean said to me when I asked him for funding for the 100th time. So what's the impact of what you do, of your Global Mind learning program in the hotel school? Does it actually work? Do we really need international students? It costs so much money to get them on board. The recruitment is expensive. Can you show us your impact? Well, and together with a team of people, we try to do something about that. Today, I will talk firstly about the timeline and the context of the tool that we developed, the so-called Global Mind Monitor. And it may sound illogical to first explain the context and then the actual content, but it's important to see it in line with the developments in internationalization in the Netherlands, which are, well, related to what's happening in the world, but which are also quite specific. And finally, I would like to end with an example of the international impact research that we do with the Global Mind Monitor data. And hopefully there's also time for Q&A. If you want to check out the environment, online environment, you can, hopefully this works. Yesterday it worked I tested it yesterday. If you check the QR code while I'm talking, I know many people are very good at multitasking, so you can check out the environment already while I'm talking about it. Let me just give you a few seconds to take a picture if you want. And otherwise, you can always go to globalmind.info. Well, starting with a depressing message, that's not the best way to open a keynote, but I had to do it. Somewhere in January, I saw somebody sent this picture to me and I found it really depressing. At the FBI headquarters, a value wall with fairness, integrity, diversity, leadership, compassion was painted over, not just painted over, but with gray paint. How drab, how awful. And yeah, just a few days later, somebody sent me the list of current prohibited words in the US and which universities research are tested on. And I immediately called my colleagues in the US like, okay, does this mean we have to stop our work? And they say, no, but we might have to use different words. We'll talk to you later. So that really, I found that really depressing. And I think you all felt the same way too when received that news. Similar, of course, a rising of populist sentiments in Europe, which is going on. But yeah, there are also positive messages, like the way Harvard is taking a stance in diversity and inclusion. But in my field, I work in a hospitality management school. The CEO of Marriott, Anthony Capuano, really spoke out about D&I, saying the winds blow, but there are some fundamental truths for 89 years of Marriott. We welcome all to our hotels. We create opportunities for all, and fundamentally, those will never change. The words might change, but that's who we are as a company. So he took a stance for all the employees at Marriott, um, uh, whom he is boss of, and he got 40,000 emails from his associates in return. Marriott is one of the companies that has a president of multicultural affairs in their board. So they take diversity and inclusion very seriously. And I see that because I'm also internship supervisor at Marriott, that they put their money where their words are. I'm not sure that's the right expression. But that is a hopeful message. Maybe on another level, this is also a hopeful message, not for Manchester or Chelsea or Wolverhampton Wanderers fans, perhaps, but Arne Slot, a fellow Dutchman, coach of Liverpool FC, won the Premier League, at least not officially, but unofficially, last Sunday with his team consisting of many different nationalities and cultures. And I have insider knowledge that the training at the Dutch Football Association contains a module about cultural sensitivity. So trainers who are trained in the Dutch coaches are really trained at working with a multicultural team and taking cultural backgrounds into consideration. And yeah, I'm a fan of Arne Slot, but I think what he's doing with his team really works out on the field. You can see it. So that's a message of hope. To translate that into education, Boudewijn Zende, who used to play for Chelsea and for Liverpool, and who was also a vice coach at Chelsea for a while, he lives in Maastricht now, and I invited him as a speaker at our homecoming event for interns. And Boudewijn really showed to be a true global mind. He speaks different languages. He really thinks about tuning into different cultures when he coaches them. And for our students, he is really a role model. And inviting role models is really a very good way, especially with young people, to inspire them. Like if he does it, I can do it too. So I found that also a message of hope. And finally, of course, this conference is a message of hope because I see the many contributions and also the many people present here. I feel less alone. I feel we have a coalition or maybe even an army of the willing who are going to continue with our efforts to spread the gospel of global competence. Now, let's have a look at our modest contribution about having impact. And I'll show you the timeline of 10 years of our Global Mind Monitor, which we celebrated a few weeks ago. Yeah, it all started with the question like, okay, what are the skills and attitudes that young professionals need to succeed in this changing globalized world? In 2009, I had the opportunity to start a PhD study. And the first article I found when I started looking online was by Darla Deerdorf's dissertation. And she really inspired me, and her definition really became my go-to definition. And because I work in the field of hospitality, I thought, how great would it be if I investigated the role of intercultural competence in the hotel sector? Because hotels are really a micro society where the staff is from many different countries and cultures and backgrounds, but also the guests. So the day of an employee is a day full of intercultural service encounters. And that really sparked off my interest. And I surveyed, amongst others, receptionists, but also did an experiment with guests in which I manipulated intercultural competences. But I also did a number of interviews with managers and with receptionists as well. And then the funny thing was that the receptionist said to me, those questions in the survey, can I get the results? Because I think it's really about my daily work and I would like to know where I stand. And I thought, hey, that's interesting. I've never been asked before to get the results of a survey. Usually we do the survey, process the data, and then write an article about it. But now actually a participant asked me, I'd like to know how I scored on these questions. And I thought, after my PhD, do I want a real academic career and publish a lot, or do I want to give back to the school that gave me so much? And I thought, why not try to give back the results of the survey to the students? And that idea I proposed to several colleagues from other hotel schools, and we sat together for a number of times and we developed a basic tool consisting of validated scales and to which we added background variables, but also things like a number of educational interventions. And then we thought, okay, it will help us to research, but we will also give it back to the students. But I needed some tech guys for that. Unfortunately, I had a few tech colleagues. So we developed our first version of the Global Mind Monitor. And as you can see, its reporting scores are stacked bar charts with the median score and the score of the student relative to the median and percentiles. And to be honest, a lot of students really found it very difficult to interpret. So we had to make extra documents to explain how to interpret the scores, but also actually literally the statistics. Nevertheless, we saw, okay, somehow it works because students can now say, yeah, I actually am more empathetic than I thought. Or I came back from my internship and I was less open-minded. How can that be? So we found that students were starting to find tools and words to talk about their competencies next to the qualitative reflections that they already did. And I must say, one factor that I'd like to give you as an advice, it comes down to luck as well, because I got a postdoc from the university because internationalization was just was growing, becoming more important, and there was a lot of funding available for internationalization. So if you ever want to start something like this, you need tech people, and you need a, a board at the university in favor of internationalization. Nicely enough, the local newspaper also picked us up. Global Mind helps youth. Do students manage abroad? At that time, internationalization was really associated primarily with going abroad. And in our school, that's a possibility because all students do an international internship in their second year. So though we included interventions at home, the focus of the outside world is really like you go abroad and what do you learn? At the same time, in the Netherlands, internationalization in higher education is really booming. You know, let's say the pioneers like Hans de Wit, but also people like Jos Belen, Elspeth Jones, Eva Haug. They're all people who are like pioneering in the EAIE and very active in it as well. The Netherlands NAVIC policy office opened so-called NASO offices in Brazil, in Russia, in Indonesia, in India, in China. So the Netherlands, like they used to be in colonial times, are again very active in internationalization in higher education. And we sort of surfed on that wave as well. The very first COIL conference was held in 2016 in The Hague. And Simone Hackett, Eva Haug, as I already said, are some of the pioneers of COIL. And of course, taking from SUNY University, New York, who started it all. And I also became a very big fan of collaborative online international learning, but also found how daunting it is to organize it. And that's why I'm so impressed by the initiatives I saw from the other presenters. In 2019, so it all went really well, but then in 2019, there was an interdepartmental investigation in the Netherlands about the affordances of internationalization. So organized, mind you, by the Ministry of Finance. Finance, money, yes, indeed. So we started to see that the influx of international students was really high. Internationalization was very successful. This created some pressure on the housing market, students taking up rooms, of course, and also bringing money to the economy, but nobody talked about that. Is it really necessary to do everything in English, English as a language of tuition? So questions were asked by politicians, and this interdepartmental investigation started. I was part of one of the tables there. There we could already see the root of, okay, concern about internationalization, whereas until then it had really been a surge of success. It brought us to the idea like, okay, we're doing this global mind monitor with 5 hotel schools. There are a few other hotels for a few other universities joining, but there were a lot of technical problems. And we also found we're a public institute. We are not meant to manage and host a tool. And we just couldn't manage it with our small team anymore. So we joined forces with ATIL, a market research company near us, who we got along really well with and who had a lot of technical opportunities also because privacy law became important. They were good at firewalling and things like that. And ATIL saw it really as a way to do something about their sustainability efforts. So to participate with a public institute, with a university in education for a better world, they agreed to work together with us and we signed a contract with them. And then, of course, just few weeks later, Corona hit and COVID, and we all had to sit at home, and all the international internships were suddenly brought to a halt. And that gave me, let's say, a good argument to say, why is it so difficult to do COIL? This is the way, this is something we can use all the time, even if there are no internship opportunities. Students can't go abroad anymore, they can't travel, they're at home, but you can still meet virtually online with others. So internationalization at home became much more important. It got traction. And we had time to go back to the drawing board and redesign the environment of the monitor to make it less dependent on us and more independent. So we created a number of things that I will talk about in a minute, and especially this environment. Yeah, and nice to say that Robert Dijkgraaf, the then Minister of Education, who is an eminent natural physicist. He's worked at Princeton, very, very smart person. He came to talk to us at a fair, at an education fair in Maastricht. And he said to us, you're using this tool in higher education. I think you should also use it in vocational education and in secondary education because it's very important that we raise global citizens in the Netherlands. That message was really heartwarming for us. We admired Robert Dijkgraaf. But he's also the person who created, and this is Dutch again, the law, how do you say that, law proposal, internationalization in balance. There was so much pressure on him from politics to do something about the high number of international students in the Netherlands and the high number of courses that were taught in English, that he needed to come up with legislation. And that legislation is now taken over, that proposal, by a new minister from a more, let's say, mildly populist government, which really wants to put a lot of checks and balances on internationalization. And for us, for the hotel management school, the worst part is that we all have to take a test to prove that it's really necessary to do our tuition in English, to have an English curriculum. We have to prove why it is essential that we do so. And we will have a hard time because nearly all the hotel schools in the Netherlands offer tuition in English. And it's very likely that they will say, well, not all of you have to teach in English. For me, the departure of international students would really be no less than a disaster because incoming internationalization is just as inclusive as internationalization at home. It creates an opportunity for students to meet each other and to learn from each other. And I see that happening every day. So now from the, let's say, the prodigy, the pioneer in internationalization, there are now in times higher education, why the Netherlands can be a high-risk destination for students. I do selection. We have a selection and we can select our students. So I often do interviews with candidates and they ask me, is it okay for me to come to the Netherlands? Can I stay for 4 years? Can I find a room? Those are the kinds of questions that they ask me now. I never heard that before. Some destinations say no need to recruit because we're not sending students to the Netherlands anymore. Well, that would be really a pity because we still have these international classrooms. We still have this English language tuition. So maybe that is why the message, the message that somebody sent me of the FBI office really made my heart sink when I saw it. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean we don't continue. On the contrary, we will continue even more and even more intensively. So we really celebrated 10 years of the Global Mind Monitor. So what is it? Let's have a look at the affordances for the students. Students can take the Global Mind Monitor multiple times. At the hotel school, we have use it as a reflection instrument in our selection. So students can candidates fill out the Global Mind Monitor, and we see it as a message to them, just as much as we see it as an opportunity for them to reflect where they stand. What we want to send out to them is this is what matters to us. This is what we find important in a student. Yeah, it is part of our ambition to provide data-driven insight for educators and for students. So the students get their results, we get the data. The hotel schools and all the other academies that participate can actually ask ATIL for their data so that they can analyze them. That is one of the affordances because I worked with different tools and I could never get hold of the data. So I could never look at an aggregate level what is actually going on, what are the trends. These are the institutions and it's changing, it has changed ever since I made this slide. But these are the institutions that we work with in Leuven, in Belgium as well. And the American university that we work with is Penn State University. And we have a fantastic collaboration with them. We also do research together with them. And maybe good to mention is that in the Netherlands, we still have the binary system. So we have research universities and universities of applied sciences, the so-called polytechnics in your country, in the UK, that were merged quite a while ago, but we still have this binary system. Yeah, I still navigate on the definition of Darla Deerdorf, someone who is interculturally competent, behaves and communicates effectively and appropriately in cross-cultural situations based on knowledge, skills, and attitudes. To find the perfect measure of this intercultural competence is absolutely impossible. There are always things that you will miss. If you include everything, the questionnaire becomes too long, and students are already complaining that the questionnaire is long, but that's because we use validated scales and we don't want to miss out on the fundamentals, and we really want it to mean something. But I must say, I saw in some of the presentation, not everybody's a big fan, but I'm also a fan of the conceptualization of the OECD, saying, okay, it's the value, skills, knowledge, and attitude needed to examine local, global, and intercultural issues, understand and appreciate perspectives and worldviews of others, and engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions across cultures in order to be able to take action for collective well-being and sustainable development. I found this model very intuitive, very comprehensive. And when I show it to a student or to an intern, I ask them, can you see which one of the drops really speaks to you and something that you have done or experienced to develop it? They can usually come up with an answer. So it really helps as a conceptualization for students, is my experience. Even though, and I understand the critique of it being very Western dominated. So these are the elements of the Global Mind Monitor: the knowledge, what type of person, your drive, and your actions. And as you can see, the knowledge, the motivation, and the behavior are in there, but also the traits of the multicultural personality uh, questionnaire: empathy, open-mindedness, flexibility, emotion, stability, and social initiative, and a measure of ethnocentrism, which we find it important that students reflect on. And as you can see, we've also added recently in the new version a sustainability measure, because we saw that many, our school, but also other schools, were increasingly embedding sustainability in their curriculum. And we thought it might be a good idea to add a skill. And we used the engagement and disengagement with sustainability questionnaire from Paulo Moreiro in our tool as well. This really helps students to reflect on their engagement with sustainability, to what extent they're engaged or disengaged, or both at the same time, as we sometimes see. So shouldn't forget to mention that we also have a lot of context variables and background questions, like what is your international experience, the international activities you did in your university, and we also ask for willingness to cross borders. This is the way that the scores are presented. So we now have bar charts. The students can take a 360-degree feedback, so they can ask someone else to fill out the main questions as well. And you can also, if you take it multiple times, see a trend line and navigate hovering over the over the charts. You can see additional information. What we see now is that, and that there's always a next step, of course, for which we always need funding, and that's always daunting. But we see now that the next step is, okay, students get this report, and then it's not an assessment tool. Huh? We don't want teachers to assess them on their empathy. That's not our intention. But what we do want is that they use it as a reflection tool. So they did a coil or a story circle or a project, and then we asked them to reflect, okay, how does this compare to your scores? Does it underpin any of your scores? And that needs some extra, we need extra information for teachers, but we also need extra information for the students. So currently, for instance, a research assistant of mine is making videos of all the elements of the Global Mind Monitor, and those videos will be also posted so that students can see an example of, for instance, empathy development or flexibility from people from the field. So we ask people like Boudewijn Zenden, the football player, but also academics, teachers. We ask different people to present us with chefs with their examples. So it's work in progress, really. And we also we see the people who we collaborate with as partners, and we really ask them for their critical feedback and if they have ideas. And we also ask them to submit their own work. So in the environment, you will also see videos, how to use, what is it, and how to work with it. And we also collect student stories, the blogs from students, for instance, that they wrote, or projects that they did. Sometimes we interview students for their experiences, which also serve as inspiration. And an educator's toolkit in which we ask colleagues, okay, if you have a really cool initiative, something that really works well in your classroom and at home activity, please share it with us, and then we'll post it in the educator's toolkit to give people ideas. Examples are, for instance, the story circles, which were developed by UNESCO with Darla Deerdorf, but also the dive exercise, describe, interpret, verify, evaluate. And somebody's now writing up, we recently had a fantastic activity called Breaking the Bread, where people would sit at the table with people they don't know, and they asked questions to each other on a prepared format. We also have some Lego series play activities on diversity and inclusion. So we try to add them to the educator's toolkit, and we definitely invite other people to join as well. Yes, and of course, embedding in the curriculum is a must. Embedding internationalization at home. If it is not embedded in the program, students will not become aware and will not develop themselves. And this is my colleague Hilde Hanegreefs. She created for our academy, Hotel Management School Maastricht, a really nice learning program that was also very revealing to us. Like, okay, gosh, I didn't know we were doing all those things and that they're all about raising or increasing global competence. It also shows that we take 4 measurements of the Global Mind Monitor. So before the student starts, before their internship, after their internship, in the 3rd year, and after the 4th year, they take the Global Mind Monitor so they can really monitor their development. Yeah, I realize that an internationalization at home is much more inclusive than abroad. And I fully agree with you that going abroad is not possible for everybody. But I have personally experienced the great transformational value of going abroad. If you look carefully, really carefully, you can see that the person on the left was a much, much, much younger me in the Hyde Park Hotel in London, which is now Mandarin Oriental. And when I started working at the hotel school, I did an internship there and 6 weeks, and it was the best time of my life. And it really sparked off a lifelong interest in cultures and intercultural communication. Because the hotel, as I already said, there were Italian, French colleagues, but I studied English literature, but I didn't know anything about English culture. I really didn't have a clue about high context communication that I experienced in the hotel, opposed to my Dutch directness. This experience has really helped me to shape my classes, my tuition. So I really, really, really think it's good for students to go abroad. And we're in the lucky circumstance that we're only 5 kilometers from the Belgian border. And you all know Hofstede. And Hofstede once said, well, there are no countries that are so different in values than the Netherlands and Belgium. So just traveling 10 kilometers, you are already in a different culture. Brussels is a case of its own, French and English speaking part. So you don't have to travel far to learn. But obviously, COIL that I'm still trying to get started in our school with difficulty, but it's getting better and better. COIL is, of course, one of the other very good affordances that are low cost, but with high effect. Yeah, something that my colleague Hilde did as well was this reflection task during the internship. We started in 2016 with asking the students to write blogs about their intercultural experiences abroad, and we collected those as well for research purposes. So a qualitative development measure of developing global competence. But Hilde found out that students were really using AI for their blogs. So she masterfully changed the assignment to a photo collage, which at this point you still cannot fake at first sight. What cultural phenomena do you see in your destination? A blog with the help of AI. So ask AI, the ChatGPT, to write your blog and then reflect on the whether it's actually true, whether you can corroborate it with your own experience. And the third one is a vlog or a podcast, switching perspectives. It's a lot of work that has to be done to get the students to do that, but it seems to work. We've been doing this for 2 semesters now. Just an example of how we add qualitative reflections to the quantitative measurements. Because that's my point. I would never want the Global Mind Monitor to be used as a quantitative assessment as such. I don't care if a student scores low on empathy, as long as they can tell, okay, why is it? And can they give an example of where they found it difficult to empathize? I find their reflection much more important. Fortunately, we have very few students who score very low on empathy, although why fortunately? Why am I even saying that? The one example that I wanted to show you is a reflection from a student in the US. And I'm really impressed by the way our colleagues at Penn State use the Global Mind Monitor. They use it pre-post a course on intercultural communication. And it's taken from students, it's university-wide. So there were even American football athletes when I was a visiting professor there in my classroom. And that gave me a huge opportunity to talk about emotional stability, flexibility, and working in a diverse team. This student says, I was able to recognize that I struggle more with my own cultural identity than I previously realized. Because it's designed to be a judgment-free space that allows you to analyze your cultural knowledge, I expect the course to be a similar space for this semester as the class grows and learns more about cultural intelligence. That was really a heartwarming message. So this student wrote this reflection before, and the teacher also asked them to write a reflection afterwards. And again, obviously, Penn State is going to use those data to analyze and write about. Yeah, this is our team, and at the back you can see the Hotel Management School in Maastricht, at least the hotel part, which is situated in a 19th part medieval castle. And this is our team, which we work on research, but also educational activities and social impact. So, for instance, we also give training sessions for refugee counselors, municipality officers, and in healthcare. As a lecturer, as we call it in the Netherlands, you have these tasks of doing research, also have social impact, and contribute to education. The person I want to highlight here is Albert Mangami, our PhD student, and his primary position is at Erasmus University in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And we gave Albert all the data from the Global Mind Monitor, and we asked him, okay, what do you think is worth, what would be novelty value to investigate? And he came up with this project. How do the different international experiences our students have before they even enter our institutions impact their intercultural competence? What impact do they have when the students are enrolled? And how does their development under our care impact their professional choices? So he looks at intercultural competence before arrival, the effect of the institutional interventions, and he will do a study on ethnocentrism, a more conceptual study, more fundamental, and he will investigate alumni and see how they have developed after they graduated and whether they're still as interculturally competent as when they left. Just briefly, because I'm almost at the end of my talk, his primary study that is now almost ready to be published looks at what the relationship is between the international experience students have prior to entering higher education and their intercultural competence. Not all the data in the database were suitable, so it was trimmed down to 5,628 students in 7 different institutes in the Netherlands. Yeah, and I'm not going too deeply into the findings, but it is nice to mention that international experience has a large impact on an individual's intercultural competence. The key result has been the influence of a diverse social network on intercultural competence. Individuals who had friends and other members of their community who came from cultural backgrounds different from their own reported higher ICC in comparison to any other international experience. So what does this mean? I would have liked to bring Albert along, but I didn't want to take his well-deserved holiday away. Would have been nicer if he told you himself. That institutions that want to make the most of their students' intercultural capital should consider international experiences in their admissions criteria, classroom composition, and curriculum design. International students and the experience they bring enrich our pedagogical climate. Intuitively, we knew this already, but now it is, let's say, underpinned by data. Our findings warn that efforts to reduce the diversity of communities, students, and programs in the Netherlands and abroad ultimately contradict the factors that increase the 21st century skills of students required to succeed effectively and appropriately in a globalizing world. So if my dean asks me again, what's your impact? I think we have an answer now. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Persevering at the moment when something seems hopeless and impossible. That's what gives me hope. David van Rijbroek, who is Flemish, Belgium by the way, is now currently the philosopher of the Netherlands, and he wrote an essay about hope in hopeless times. And I would like to end my presentation with that, because I think regardless of what's going on in the world, nobody can ever take away a tool, an instrument that we have. And at this point, we're not even thinking about giving it any other name than the Global Mind Monitor. So thank you for joining my keynote. I once again like to thank Anthony and the team for inviting me. And the last slide is an overview of our publications so far. And maybe nice to say that we're currently also working on a presentation or a publication about engagement and disengagement with sustainability based on our first data. So I will stop here and I will stop sharing and hand back to Anthony.
Thank you so much, Ankie. We loved that. It was amazing and great to see your journey and all the areas of impact, as well as the key messages, given the turbulent times that so many of us are experiencing in this area.